Thank you for joining us live with Miami's Community News, and I'm Michael Miller. Our guest today is Robert Ruano. Thank you for being here, Robert.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
So you've been involved in Miami-Dade County for a while, and
Sure.
recently you served as a member and the president of a chair of the Planning Advisory Board for Miami-Dade County.
Yeah, a couple years ago. Yeah,
Yes.
I was on there. I was on that board for about 5 years.
And so in that capacity, what are some of the things that you looked at?
Well, we looked a lot about the. We looked a lot at the urban development boundary and attempts to move that. We looked at what's it called? Miami. What was the big amusement park over in Miami Lakes that they finally passed?
Yeah, and whatever happened to that?
I think it stalled. I think it stalled because of some. I read somewhere that it was stalled because of some approvals, but actually that came to our board twice. First time was supposed to come in and then get referred for more traffic information. The next time it came with more information, I actually was the only one on the board that voted against it. Everybody voted for it, but
All right.
it finally passed the county commission. But
So people want to know, why does somebody get involved in these type of things, and why you and why them?
well, I mean, you have to care. You have to do something that you care about. So I personally try to get involved in things that I care about. So transportation is a big one. Mobility is a big one. I've been involved in that, both with biking and walking, and just advocating for mobility for people in Miami. The other thing is trees. I get involved very much with trees. I sit on the board of the Arbor Day Foundation in Nebraska. I've been involved with trees for probably 20 years or so.
Give me my
Planting,
chainsaw. I'm going to take care of all of them.
Yeah,
No,
you
just
can't.
kidding.
You live in horse country. You can't do that.
So with the PAB, people go before the board there because they have a project that they want to
Yeah.
move forward.
So what most people don't know is that, and this is what we got a lot of. So the PAB is for the county. The county has planning and zoning separate. So the planning is for the PAB. They look at what's called the Comprehensive Development Master Plan, what they call the CDMP. The CDMP is a long-range plan that determines what the use of individual properties all over the county, what they're going to be in the future, right? As you probably know, horse country is protected. Agriculture is protected in horse country. But there's a lot of other agriculture in unincorporated Miami-Dade County. And all of those properties within the UDB are slated to become residential. So they may become, you may have a 3-acre property that's going to have, I don't know, 10 units per acre at some point, and then you've got a developer that's either bought it or optioned that property and has come to the PAB with a project to go from 10 units per acre to 30 units per
So
acre.
let's say a property way west, let's say west of Chrome, all right?
Okay.
That's zoned agriculture at
Right.
this point. There's a,
Inside the UDB?
yeah, let's say
Okay.
it's inside.
Okay.
All right. So what happens? And they just go, listen, I want to divide this guy up. It used to be 5 acres, now it's 4.5 because the county maybe put a dirt road in.
Right.
So what happens to that person and say, I want to develop this?
Right.
Can they do that? And how long?
They can develop it with the current future use without going to any board as of right.
Current, future.
So if it's agriculture, and let's say it was slated to be 10 units per acre, then they can develop it at 10 units per acre, and they don't have to go for the board. They just have to get their regular permits. But if they want to go further than that, which a lot of them do, obviously the reason they're buying these lands because they want to make more and more money.
So right across from Robertson's here. There was
Oh God, I know that well.
all right. People would go down there. It was like, a blast to the past. You could go in and you would just be in this different space.
Yeah.
You walk in, and then now when you go in, what are you looking at?
Well, I haven't been down there since it was developed, but I assume they're townhomes, right?
Yeah, across the street.
Yeah, actually, the developer, one of the developers is a friend of mine, and that project came before our board, and I voted against it. It was just, if they wanted to develop what they originally had, then okay, we can't do anything about it. It's terrible because it's right across from Robert's here. It's a beautiful agricultural land. We can't do anything about it. They could develop it, but just to say, okay, this seems like a good plan. Let's raise it. No, let's make it bigger.
So if people were somebody's grandparents were true farmers down there, and they had 5 acres or 10, because that's most of the smaller things, and then the dad got it and he didn't care. So third level, all right, he goes, no, I want the money, all right?
Right.
Because I don't care about whatever it is.
Yeah.
They have certain property rights.
Yes.
And they move forward, and of course the neighbors now, they're fighting whoever it is that don't want it to happen. I see the state is also putting some, where it's going to be harder for the neighbors to protest
Oh, really?
and to,
What a surprise.
and there may even be some liability for that person to do that. And so that is to try to control some of that. Well, let's talk about, if we could, about traffic and mobility and all these roads that are going in, all right? Certainly the big overpass near downtown, I was on it the other day. It's not quite completed. I have a truck. I thought I was gonna like fly right off. The roads are sort of thin with the cones all through there.
Right.
That was a $1 billion project about 5 years ago. It's probably 50% more at this particular point. There's a lot of traffic that's going up and down there, right?
Yes.
So east and west, north and south, and through the gables, right? We know that more apartments are going up, more business are going up. It's getting more people to go in there. Tell us about the traffic in the gables.
Well,
Your favorite subject.
my favorite subject. Well, to be honest, the traffic in the Gables is mostly in the major roads, to be honest, and in the downtown. The downtown traffic, I've lived in the Gables now 20 years, and the downtown traffic is gotten worse and worse and worse. I mean, I used to fly through. I used to take Aragon to get home because it was a nice way to get through, and now you just can't take that from the downtown because it's so slow. The good thing about the Gables, you can go, if you live there, you can go through some of the back roads and kind of get to your house. But the traffic is increasing, and unfortunately, the city's not doing a lot about it. There was in 2014, I think it was, there was a bike master plan that they passed that had all these connections, like connecting the metro rail to the downtown. Like Ponce de Leon could take a bike lane without any infrastructure movements, just paint, moving cars to one side. And then the city is just kind of sat on those projects. Every time those projects come up in the Gables, the commission tends to vote them down. So unfortunately, the traffic will continue to get worse, but we have to figure out different solutions. And it's not just one solution, obviously. The trolley, the freebie, biking, walking, scooters, everything.
And I've certainly have seen more scooters.
Yeah.
Right? Around all the time.
Even personal scooters that people buy.
And I am completely freaked out. I see one of those guys, all right? And then unfortunately, it's bad enough during the day, but early in the morning or night, you just see these two little red lights.
Yes.
And you have all the bicyclists that are out there. So we see more and more of that where people have to be more attentive at what they're doing. And when I see it, I drive by 2 blocks before I take a right turn because I'm just afraid that the guy's going to be able to speed up. And when you turn, it's hard to see them. So really, managing mobility is a variety of things, as you point out.
Yeah, of course.
And walking is one of them.
Walking.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
Right. We know years ago, Victor Dover said, hey, listen, let's make bigger sidewalks. Back then, it was so obscure. What? You want bigger sidewalks and smaller streets? A perfect example for us here in South Miami is Deli Lane and Sunset Tavern.
Love that place.
Right. All that street turned into dining. And so it forces the traffic to slow down, which theoretically would mean if you had some other mobility, you might choose to do that other part.
Right. Can I say one thing? You mentioned sidewalks. There's an interesting project going on in the Gables right now, close to my house, where it's going to connect. It will connect the sidewalk network for about 2.9 miles, all the way back from the Biltmore Hotel, west of the Biltmore, all the way back to Douglas Road. It's 5 houses that they would need to put sidewalks in front of them. The city, in their wisdom, has gone to several of the residents, and the residents said, along there, by the way, there's no swale in the area. The sidewalks are behind these big black olives, and the city has gone to the residents, and 3 of the residents have said, we don't want the sidewalk. If we're going to get the sidewalk, we don't want it up against our house. We want it up against the street. So the city is now designing sidewalks for just 5 houses that are against the street with a curb, in a street that has no curb, putting pedestrians up where it's less safe because 3 residents don't want it. It's crazy.
So just be careful when you're out there walking.
You don't want to touch on that, do you?
No, I don't. Bang. Oh, sorry. Right. So And for whatever the reasons the cities are doing that, and we saw a big stink down in Palmetto Bay,
Yeah.
where they put in this airplane runway. At some points, it ranged from 5 to 8 feet, and it moved the sidewalk, which is close to the street, very much closer to the homeowners, but it was on city property,
Right.
or county property.
Yeah.
And so it's in now, and it's like no big deal, right? And it's not used nearly as much as everybody thought. But you brought up a good point about that connectivity.
Right.
And that's one of the things I learned with Victor. Thank you, Victor. Is so you can say here. If you start here and you go, this is the loop, and it can come around. And the underline is like that. You can start over there,
Right.
and you have this great walkway. I remember my dad in the '80s. He used to run underneath the
Metro.
Metro. I said, "You are crazy." Who knew? 25 years later, nah, it's okay, it's cool, right?
Yeah.
And then we would spend so much time, in trying to make those more attractive.
Yeah.
So there's an election coming up in Coral Gables
Yes.
relatively soon. And maybe whoever gets on that board, there's like 5 or 6, 7 people running in 2 seats.
Yes.
Maybe somebody will be a little more attentive to that. But you have been in a position to where you get pulled in all different directions.
Yeah.
So when these commissioners or councilmen, depending on where they are, they get pulled all the time.
Right.
Big picture, it would be perfect. But we got to pay attention to this, and neighbors over here, and to the professional staff.
Right.
So it should be interesting to what the city,
See what happens.
What the city comes up with. So let's talk about a couple things, our Everglades.
Yeah.
So the state's not finding, but they're paying more attention to the Everglades. What's going to happen now then?
Well, hopefully it's a continuation of the Everglades restoration plan, which had there's a couple things. There's the elevation of the road, the Tamiami Trail, you've seen that.
Yes.
And now that's going to continue more. And then there was, from what I understand, there was some protection areas that were going to be added or fixed. I'm not familiar with the protection area stuff, but the majority is elevating that roadway. And that's going to cause the flow of water that was stopped.
And that's ever so. I used to, when I was a teenager, used to go snake hunting in the Everglades all the time. It was great. All right. I used to really enjoy going out there and doing that. And I remember when there was huge droughts, all right, the snakes couldn't figure out what to do because they were dying. But when this water goes back and forth, it'll be freedom for them, for the snakes and the other animals, but also for the water. The project that I was glancing at, it's a huge project, right? Gigantic. I think the state's putting, if I heard the figure right, $4 billion.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It sounds like a lot. I'm not sure as far as what that means. But for us down here, that is what we strive to protect. And it's on the top of the list of a lot of county people about how to protect that. How do we factor spending the $4 billion over there when we have 120,000 septic tanks here in Miami-Dade County? How do we deal with both those things?
I think we are. I mean, fortunately, and I don't know if you saw, but the county has received quite a bit of money to start changing from septic to sewer in several areas, and they're focusing on the key areas that contamination into canals. So I know, for example, in the Little River in El Portal, they're going to be doing a project that's like 100 homes. So they're tackling both. Okay. Now remember, Everglades restoration is mostly a federal project,
yes,
right? I mean, it's mainly what it is. I mean, there was some county involvement and everything. There still is going to be county involvement, but it's a federal project. So you kind of have to do both because the water that's coming down from Lake Okeechobee has to be cleaned. And if it doesn't flow properly through the slough, it's not going to get cleaned.
yes.
And we're going to have dirty water in Florida Bay. We're going to have fish die off. We're going to have red tide again. So it's obviously very important to us because, I mean, what's our main industry?
Yep.
Tourism.
Yes.
Well, yeah, tourism because of this,
Yes.
right? So you kind of have to do both at the same time.
Alex, can we run your website across the bottom? So if people need to reach you, they can do that.
Sure, if you
All
want
right.
to. Yeah.
We're good there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with the septic tank, so what it means is the bad areas, the tough areas where there's big problems, that's going to be tackled first. So the people way out west where there's only one home per 5 acres or 10, and it's not going to happen for a while because it's too expensive to hook that up.
Right. Well, you probably do. I mean, I don't know if everybody knows, but the reason why the septic tanks are bad is not really the tank itself.
Right.
It's the drain field.
Yes.
Right. And so when the water rises, The contaminated water gets contaminated with the groundwater. That particularly goes into our rivers, canals, lakes, and then you have an issue.
So years ago, when we had these two back-to-back 100-year floods, that's some property way out there, and it was it wasn't up to knees, up to the calf for about a week and a half. And I'd been walking through that for a while with, I don't know if I was wearing high rubber boots, but my feet got so infected because that water getting into the little cracks that were there. So we know there's a lot of stuff that's there waiting, that's going down at some point. I understand the county is also right now for the people that can still get septic tanks, that they change the drain field structure.
Right.
And it's a little pricier, and it's going to do a better job.
Sure.
So let's talk, if we could, a little bit about what caused, the white fly disease on ficus trees that completely changed the landscaping of Miami-Dade County.
Yes.
Right? Tell us what you know about that.
What I know, as a matter of fact, I was a little bit involved in that. At the time, when whitefly came out, I was the director of grants and sustainability at the city of Miami. That was about 2007, 2008, something like that. And we were looking, because everybody was using ficus. Ficus vengemina is the one that
and spraying it with whiteflies.
No. And you get massive die-offs. And so at the time, we actually consulted because the city had a big question of what are we going to do? We're going to start spraying everything with chemicals without really knowing what the effect is going to be on the environment, on the trees, on anything else, on any other bug, right? So we actually we went to a horticulturist, you may know him, Jeff Shemansky. He's a guy that set up Jungle Island, and he was at Parrot Jungle for many years. And he recommended a treatment that was a kind of a brine, I believe it was a brine treatment. That's what we started. And it worked for a while. They didn't have to spray. But I think the whitefly really started multiplying and getting into places where now you're using, what is it, the Clusa?
Yes.
That's replacing the ficus.
And there were a lot of people who spent a lot of money spraying.
Yeah. Yeah, and there is. And it's funny because you go to old neighborhoods in Miami, you can basically tell when it was landscaped by just what kind of shrubbery they have, right?
It's pretty amazing.
Right? But that leads to a very important point. The ficus is a invasive, exotic, plant. We were planting it, and we've been planting a lot of exotics over the years. The problem with exotics is they don't always adapt well, or something may come in later on, like this whitefly, that would kill it. So they've gotten to planting the Clusa, which is, I believe it is native to Florida. So planting that kind of stuff, for example, in my house, I have cocoa plum, which is also a native. So if you stick more to natives, you have a less chance of getting bugs or insects and that kind of stuff.
So speaking of invasive, iguanas and pythons.
Yes.
Right. I come from an animal background, and when I see what's happened to the Everglades, our four-legged furry friends are gone. And I think it's great people go out and hunt the pythons.
Yep.
I think it's not going to matter that much, right? Something has to come along, like a virus, bacteria, that is going to kill them, right? Just like what happened with ficus, right? And if the people that kept spraying their ficus trees at huge costs would have stopped, they would have been dead in a relatively short time. They would have replaced it with something that was native. Right. So I don't know what we're going to do, whether somebody's going to invent a poison that's only going to poison pythons, right? Pretty tough to do.
Yeah.
Right? And then, of course, what do we do about our rabbits and the rabbits that aren't there? People think it does matter. It does matter. And the raccoons.
Yep.
And speaking of invasive, what about all these little lizards that are all over the place?
Oh, God.
I forgot the name of them. They're about this big. They have the orange on them.
Well, I have those in my yard. They're called giant amebas. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but they can grow up to 2 feet.
Yep.
And the males are the bright green ones, and then the females are smaller and kind of duller and stuff. They burrow under, for example, in my yard, they burrow under the walkway, so they have had to refix it. So they cause a lot of property damage. Not only that, they're competing with other native species. They're competing with other native lizards. So that starts taking a toll on your environment. You can't just introduce these species, at will, and then not think it's going to have an effect. Though we have in the Gables, for example, these little with a little lizard about this big with a red curly tail. You've probably seen them.
Yes.
They're right by Country Club Prado over by 8th Street there. Interestingly, those eat a butterfly that is in a pine rockland, right? Those lizards at Country Club Prado are literally 25 feet from a pine rockland that the city's planted. So they're putting that pine rockland at risk because of these little lizards.
See, most people, myself included in some areas, don't understand when you let that little critter loose, all right,
Yeah.
that they're gonna be able to reproduce, whether from that one or
course.
from the next one or
Of
the one
course.
after that. And the state, the county and the state need to do something to try to control that, right?
Yeah.
And maybe it'll just be managed, but for people that care, Everglades, first the water, second, what are we gonna do with the pythons?
Yeah.
Iguanas, oh, cute. Well, I used to raise them when I was a little kid. Oh, this is wonderful. Oh, just let them loose, and then all of a sudden you have them eating your plants,
Yep.
right? Some people aren't aware that you're allowed to, what's the word?
Euthanizing?
Yes, that's a good
Nice
word.
way to kill them gently.
Yes, kill them gently and try to do it privately instead of showing little Johnny, right? Lots of YouTube videos on it, all right? But so we have these invasive species. Also, think about the ficus and the iguanas, the lizards, all right?
Yeah.
And then we have humankind in here polluting Biscayne Bay.
There's
And
fish, lionfish,
Yes.
invasive.
And we look what happened to Biscayne Bay during the pandemic. It turned blue, like it was blue as this stuff here. And then I was like a clean sky. And then months later, it's back to the norm. It does have a big effect on us. I know the county has really a big push to try to clean up Biscayne Bay.
Yeah.
And there was some folks not too long ago that were filmed throwing, I think, balloons into the water.
Oh yeah, at the boat on a marina.
Yeah, and they wound up getting arrested
Good.
as well. They should,
Good.
right? And some people forget when you throw that little plastic bottle out on the street, and when it breaks up,
Sure.
and some critter eats it, some bird, all right, it goes to the stomach. We
Yeah.
see that out with the fish,
Yeah.
and you open them up and it's filled with these little particles. There's a proper way to dispose of it, and that's certainly not in horse country. All right, don't dump your stuff in horse country. Dump it in the right place. You recycle it in your blue can, and dispose of it properly because it does matter. In horse country, there's a fellow that has his ficus hedge. For 10 years, he's been spraying that every couple of months. I think he's going to give up. All right?
Really?
Thank you. All right?
You know what he can try too?
What?
A predator.
All right.
Ladybugs. They use ladybugs to.
Is that right?
Yeah. Try that too.
So there's lots of people want to have this exotic stuff, but there's a price to pay.
Yeah, of course.
For that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about mobility throughout the county.
Mm-hmm.
We know that the county and the state and the feds have spent $300 million to put in some new transportation methods from down here to Florida City,
Right.
Florida City, that will make it a little more attractive for people to go on it. The busway's been there for years.
Right.
Any thoughts really about, are we as Miamians, Miami-Dade Countyans, going to abandon our vehicles in a non-downtown area and say, I'm just going to take public transportation?
I think we could do it a lot more than we are doing it now. When it's really uncomfortable to get there, Years ago, I talked to the transportation guy at the city of Chicago, and he said, I asked him, how come so many people come in on public transportation, use their bikes, use their thing to get into downtown? He said, well, because parking is so expensive, and it's a real hassle to drive here. So we're getting to that point when more people realize that. I think more people will start using it. And there's a lot of people that want to use it, I think, but don't feel safe.
It's not popularized yet?
Right.
Yeah, and it's like, well, my friends don't do it, so why am I going to do it? And I think that's the subtlety of a lot of this, right? I went to Miami Beach to the hotel over there. It was $30 or $35 to park my car. I went, holy moly,
Yeah.
right? And I was afraid to put it to meter if there was one that they'd tow it, right? It cost $200.
Right. Well, the other thing is, we're talking, we're middle-aged guys, okay?
Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. These young people over here, like the ones in here, they have a different mentality about mobility. So we're imposing our view of mobility oftentimes on them, and they're going to be the ones that are going to be using it.
My son lives downtown. A friend of mine calls me. I saw your son in his office. And I go, where was that? He says he was on his headset, walking up and down First Avenue or whatever it was. there's a road that he walks on and he conducts his business.
Oh, wow.
And so we look at that differently. Me, I'm going, no, it's too noisy out here. I need to go to this box. And to your point, to certainly look at it differently. Tell me about when the average American is going to go, I'm going to buy an all-electric vehicle. When is that going to happen where it's going to be in mass, where people feel comfortable in refueling it or recharging it?
Well, I'll tell you my opinion, obviously. I'm no expert on electric vehicles, although I've had a couple hybrids in the past. I think it's going to take a while. I think it's going to take the average American, it's probably going to take 5 to 10 years. I think people think it's going to go faster, but these types of things, I think they take a while. I mean, there's a lot of people with electric vehicles now, but then getting the cars, people are ordering them, they're taking months and months and months. So a lot, I just heard, Kia and Hyundai came out with a new one. The new Toyota Prius came out, there was a hybrid. So people are going to evolve there, but I don't think it's going to be as quick as some people
To
think.
me and the people that I know, recharging is the big issue.
Yeah.
So we test drive different cars.
Sure.
Whenever it's electric, drives Grant crazy. We don't have a fueling device here charging, so he has to take it over somewhere.
Right.
They're 15 minutes to an hour.
Right.
I call somebody I know, he says, Michael, I only have 15 miles left in my charge of my car, and I'm not going to take it out of the apartment complex where there's a charger when it's available.
Right.
He says, I'm going to take an Uber. I'm thinking, that's the last thing in the world I want to be concerned with, because we like to drive down the street. There's a gas station here, over here, certainly within a half a mile of wherever you are. So for me, I would be looking for a convenient place to charge the car. And I'm thinking, do I want to go to a charging station and spend more than 5 minutes that it would be usually put in and trade off sitting there,
That's another point.
right?
Yeah.
Sitting there on my phone, right? When I'm not accustomed to that. So whenever that's going to take place, but that will take hundreds of thousands of those things across the country in order to do that.
Well, that the new they have the new infrastructure bill
Yes.
that has a lot of money in it for just that,
And so,
charging stations.
yeah, and I think that's part of what will get us to the next slide. Let's talk about one of the buildings in the city of Miami. They used to have solar heating, solar batteries on the top, right? What's going on over there? They still have that?
City Hall.
City Hall. Oh, that's building.
City
yes.
Hall. It had, yeah, we actually, when Mayor Manny Diaz was there, we had a partnership with a company that funded that. And we put up at the time, I think it was 4, what they called solar trees. They're very strong. They help against hurricanes and such. And we put solar panels. I think must have been, at the time it must have been 8 kilowatts of power. It wasn't a lot, but it was kind of a demonstration site. We couldn't put it on the roof at the time because the columns of the building were deteriorated. They got fixed.
Where dinner key location, City of Miami.
City Hall. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's another story. That goes back to Andrew when water was 6 feet high for a week. So anyway, yeah, but I found out that last year the city took down the panels because the inverter apparently was broken, and which didn't make sense to me because you can replace the inverter. You know, the inverter is basically what puts it from
Yes.
DC to AC, right? Am I getting
Yep.
it right? Yeah. Okay. And so they're gone now. I don't know. I think it's a shame because even though it didn't power a lot of the building, it did help reduce but it's a good demonstration
Yeah,
project.
and I think that's an important thing for there to be examples.
Yeah, sure.
When iPhones first came out, a friend of mine who was about 75, he's working on iPhone. I said, Al, if you can do that, I could do that, all right? But it was close enough to where I can learn from it. And so if anybody wants to put up some test solar panels here to community newspapers, we got a roof, all right?
You know, FPL might take you up on that.
All right, so I'm going to call them, all right? Good idea. Say, here we go. Actually,
They love doing those demonstration projects.
we've been out on some of them down south. So, Robert, thank you very much for
Thank
being
you.
here. Continue
Thank you.
your involvement in
Thank you.
Miami-Dade
It's been a
County
pleasure.
because you are making a difference.
Thank you, Michael. Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks, folks. Thanks for joining us, and Robert Ruano. If you need to be Robert, you can look on. Can you put it up his web address again? People can go to your website, take a look around, and give you a call.
Sure.
There we go. And let's do one more round there. So again, thanks for being involved. And you're with one of your friends over here.
Yeah, he's a colleague. He works with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he's working on, what's he working on?
We're working on a lot of big projects. We're looking at a lot of grants for cities, nonprofits. That's what we do. We support nonprofits and cities and help them get money for projects.
Okay.
Got a lot of stuff.
And I want to do a shout out for NAMI, which is National Alliance for Mental Illness, and for Be Strong International. Check them out, folks. Help somebody. Folks, thank you very much for joining us.